my name's Wendy and I'm from Sunflower Publishing. Tonight, I am so honoured and excited to say that Rhys Bowen is going to be chatting to me about her life and works. She is a best-selling author of more than 40 novels. Her books have been nominated for every major mystery award, and I think she's won at least 20 of those. So I am in great danger of being very tongue-tied and very starstruck. So without further ado, I'll have a quick glass of wine, I think, to steady the nerves. And I'm just going to admit her now into the room. So excited. Here she comes, all the way from California, I think. I hope.
Hello.
Hello, good evening. How are you?
Oh, I've been sick for a while, but I'm gradually getting better. So
I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm on the mend now. So not COVID, something else.
Not COVID. Thank you so much for granting this interview. I'm in danger of being very tongue-tied and very starstruck. So,
but I love to talk about Italy, so that's good.
I'm in Italy at the moment. It's been a hugely warm day. Everyone is saying that these are kind of August temperatures, really.
Yeah.
Just so humid and close. I mean, it's quite cool in the house, and I've got the fan on whirling around like some mad thing, but it's just so warm, so warm.
Where in Italy?
Abruzzo.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Just the other side to Rome, halfway down. So we're just on the Adriatic.
Yeah.
But
nice. Yeah.
You know Italy quite well yourself, though, don't you?
I do. Yeah. I mean, the patches. I wouldn't say Abruzzo somewhere I know, but I've driven down to Naples once, but that was driving through it. But I know Tuscany very well.
Yes.
I've over the years, I have a friend who has a flat in Tuoro sul Trasimeno, which actually is Umbria, but it's very close to Cortona. And I've borrowed their flat, and then I've done a writing workshop several summers in Chianti, which has been lovely.
Right, lovely.
Yeah. You sit out on this shaded porch, and you look out over the olive groves and the vineyards, and you create lovely writing things. So it was fun,
But you're very close to paradise yourself, aren't you, living in California?
Well, it's very nice. We live in Marin County, which is north of San Francisco.
Right.
And so it's not like most of California, lots of trees. We have lots of redwoods, lots of mountains. I live on a hillside and I look out across at mountains. So it's very beautiful. Yes. And I came to appreciate it when we were imprisoned during COVID, because I would sit on my balcony and I would look out, and for the first time really pay attention. I think as a writer, you need to pay attention to little tiny details. Absolutely. And I would notice the call of one bird, and there was a squirrel over there, so you notice all these little things. And so now I spend my winters in Arizona because it rains in my part of California, it did before climate change.
Right.
And so we go and spend our winter in the desert, and then we come back here for the summer. So it's pretty good. But we usually spend 6 weeks in Europe during the summer, and have not done that for 3 years, which has been
very difficult, hasn't it, regards travel? But it's just starting to kind of come back, really. But
we're tempting ourselves. We're going in September first to England to see John's sister, whom we haven't seen in 3 years, and we lost our brother-in-law while we were not there. So that's sad. And then we're going to Paris with my daughter and son-in-law, and then we're taking the cruise up the Seine into Normandy. We just wanted something, the first time back, nothing with a hassle, just something very simple. So this is a trial run for next year.
Oh, wow. Can I take you, while we're talking about travel, what can I call you? Rhys?
Yes, Rhys is fine. Thank you.
Rhys is absolutely fine, but that's okay.
Yes.
Can I take you back to England?
Yes.
Because I know that you were born in England. You were born in Bath.
Yep.
So because of that, I guess some of the novels that you've done, you've set them in very, very familiar surroundings, haven't you? Really?
Yeah, I grew up mainly in Kent,
Yeah.
in an area that when I was growing up, from my upstairs window, you saw nothing but apple orchards. And now, of course, it's been swallowed up into Greater London. In fact, when I went back a few years ago, driving through, coming up the M20, I guess it was, I couldn't even recognize where you'd turn off to get to my former house. We had a big rambling old house, and it was pulled down for the M25, so I couldn't even find it. So, but when I was growing up, it was countryside. There were villages, and I'd go out on my bike at, right after breakfast, and I'd come back when it got dark, and nobody said, "Where are you going?" So it was a very different world.
I'm sure England was really beautiful then. I was so surprised, Rhys, reading the Venice Sketchbook, because quite early on, we know that Aunt Letty is dying, so Caroline has to go back and visit her. And I suddenly find myself in familiar territory of Godalming in Surrey and Whitley. And I had to read that twice because I thought, Godalming? I was amazed. I mean, my parents lived in Guildford, so that area of England is
my in-laws lived for many years in Whitley. So
yes,
that's an area I know very well. Yeah.
The Refectory in Whitley, a beautiful pub. I thought, I know that pub. I've been to that pub so many times. Right. It was amazing to read that. So that was lovely. But let me take you back then to England. You went to London University, and one of your first jobs was in the drama department of the BBC.
It was pretty much my first and only job. I think I haven't had a serious job since then. So yes.
So how did that happen? How did you get the job?
Well, in those days, I don't know if they're still doing, the BBC sort of took in graduate trainees, and they had over 3,000 applicants, and they chose 30 people. So it's quite competitive. And you went in, this is radio, not television, but you had a chance to move across to television after you started. So you did this training course, and then they put you in all different departments, I think, to see when you were going to crack. I spent 6 months with the General Overseas Service, which is now called the World Service, and all sorts of things like doing the overnight announcing job. So 10 p.m. or maybe 8 p.m. till 6 a.m. or something, sitting next to a microphone and saying, "This is the General Overseas Service of the BBC, and we're broadcasting."
Wow. Oh, that's so exciting.
Well, it was stressful, actually. I mean, how do you stay awake all night when you have to welcome someone and say goodbye to someone? So, I was into sewing in those days because I couldn't afford clothes. So I'd have my paper patterns on the floor of the studio, and I'd be cutting out a dress, and the poor caretaker who had to bring me my coffee and things would have to step over the paper patterns. But that was the hardest, I think, for me, to stay awake all night and sound bright and cheerful. We also had to deal with all the different languages. We'd be the one English speaking person for the various languages, and they'd come bustling in 3 minutes before the program was due to start, saying, "We're going to do a complete rendition of the Quran. How many microphones do we need?" So that was, if you could handle that, when you came back, you could handle anything. And then after you'd done the training period, you could specialize. So I went into drama, obviously, because that was what interested me, and it was fabulous.
Yes.
Huge budgets in those days. Yes. Everybody wanted to work in it. I worked with Sir John Gielgud. I worked with all sorts of fantastic people. And the really ones at the top like that, Joan Plowright, Sir John Gielgud, they were so respectful. I mean, here I am, 22, and they would say, "I am not really familiar with this medium. You will tell me, won't you, if I'm doing something wrong?"
That's so nice.
And then the ones who are like instant movie stars would come in like, "Here I am, darling, stand out of the way,"
Oh, wow.
I got to work with lots of, I got to be
people. Famous
friends with
people.
lots of people like, Robert Hardy, All Creatures Great and Small.
Yes,
he
of
was
course.
a good friend. And, I made friends with lots of really nice actors. So it was a lovely time.
So from working for the BBC, then you became a drama teacher. You were actually teaching drama.
That was after I'd married and
oh, right. Okay.
But what the first thing that happened, I mean, I've always written all my life. I've been a writer, and I just written. I haven't thought of myself as a writer, but I wrote. So while I was working on plays in the BBC, I found myself thinking, if I had written this, I would not have ended it this way. So I went home and wrote my first play. And I walked down the hall with the bravado of a 22-year-old to the head of drama and said, I've written this play. And a few days later, he called me in and he said, lovely, we're going to do this. So my very first written work was done as a play by the BBC. And
that's so quite something, isn't it? Really, that's.
Yeah, so I did a couple more radio plays. I ventured a couple more TV plays. And then I probably would have stayed on and I would have ended up as sort of a senior producer for the BBC, which, there was a good track for me to go upwards as I wanted. But I got really fed up with the rain and the cold, and just London was dreary, and the young men I was meeting were not suitable husband material. They wanted a one-night stand and then goodbye, and that was not me. So I had an uncle in Australia who was quite senior with an advertising agency, and he knew the head of Australian Broadcasting. So I got a letter from the head of Australian Broadcasting saying, anytime you want to come down here, we've got a job for you. So I packed up everything and I went down to Australia. And I was only planning to stay maybe 2 years and then come back to England. But
the internet's gone.
Which was how I wound up in California instead.
Did you like Australia? Hi, Rhys. I've lost you. Hello. Apologies, we've just lost a little bit of a connection there. Could be anything, could be the weather. Let's hope she comes back. Otherwise, it'll be me talking. Hi, Rhys. Hi. She's back.
I think we froze. I don't know if that was you or me. I haven't got my main internet connection is not working, so I'm on the subsidiary one, so that could be me, but we'll go ahead. Yeah.
Yes. No, you were saying about Australia. What did you feel about Australia?
I loved it. I went down there with the intention of dating all these rugged sheep farmers who took their shirts off.
and doing some research for a book.
Oh, definitely that, yeah. I met this guy who was aristocratic British English, and who sort of had to wear a neckerchief or tie at all times and have a side plate at a picnic, so quite not what I was expecting. But anyway, so I married him, dear reader, and we came together to California, and I've been in California ever since.
You get homesick sometimes for England?
I never. When I had kids at home, I was so busy I never had time to think about it. And also, he worked for an airline, so I could go home pretty often.
Right.
But then I tell you, it's since COVID hit. I think since we had Donald Trump and everything was so unsettled here, and then we had COVID.
Yes,
I found myself feeling really homesick. There's a program called Escape to the Country. Do you watch that ever?
Of course.
I found myself watching that every day, sitting there glued to the TV going, oh, look at that village, look at it. I want that house. Should we buy that house?
Yes, I can imagine.
So yeah, I mean, recently I think the homesick pull has been a lot more. The problem is I have children and grandchildren here in America.
Yes,
so obviously,
who are very Americanized, I would imagine.
Yeah, well, I mean, they were all born here. I mean, my oldest one grew up English till she went to school, and then was really annoyed to find that she'd been speaking all wrong. They're all here. So I love to go home once a year, but my sister-in-law lives in a manor house in Cornwall, and I have to say, I have a great hankering for a little cottage in a Cornish harbour. Would be really.
You have had such an illustrious writing career. You are a best-selling author of more than 40 books, and you have been nominated for so many major mystery awards.
Yeah.
Of the awards that you have received, what would you say was, yes, it's that one, I've got that one.
I tell you, the one I haven't got most is the Edgar. The Edgar is for us what the Oscars are. Right. And I've been nominated 3 times, and each time I have not won, but just the nomination really puts you in a different, when you think the Edgar is one of the 5 best books in America. So, you know, when you're nominated, you can say, the first time I was nominated, I walked around the house saying to myself, Michael Connelly had a book out this year. Harlan Coben had a book out this year, you know, and it felt really good. So, I mean, you are treated with respect. I have won the Agatha, which is the Agatha is, it's more for, I mean, the Edgar normally goes to something much darker than I write. It normally goes to very hard-boiled, edgy. And the Agatha always goes to the traditional mystery. I won't say.
We have the ones that I saw that you had, the Agatha Award, the McCavity Award, in honor of the cat from T.S. Eliot.
And that's nice because it's Mystery Readers International, so it's not just American. So that's a nice one to have.
A nice one. And the Anthony Award.
Yeah, that's given. BoucherCon is the big mystery convention. You know, 2,000 people all get together once a year, and they give awards. So that one was really satisfying because they tend to go darker too. The funny thing was they choose a trophy to be symbolic of the area it's held in each year. And the year I won 2. I won one for best novel, and I won for best short story. And the award was a tombstone made in granite about this size.
Right.
I could hardly lift one of them. So how do you think? So I had them packed at the convention, but then I had to carry them home. And you know how bad security is. It was in Toronto. Security between Toronto and America is always horrible.
Yes.
So I had something I can hardly lift. And I know damn well they're going to say, you better open that box now.
Yes, there's something in there. A drugstore.
It weighs nothing at all. And I thought, if they open it, I'm going to say, my budgerigar died. But anyway, so that was the Anthony Award.
When you get these awards, I mean, you've had so many of these now. When you get these awards, is it just, oh, I've got another one now? Or are you still really excited? I've won. How do you feel about it?
You know, it's really, I think it's almost overwhelming each time, especially the ones you get at a big convention. You know, you've seen the Oscars. It's the same sort of thing. Everybody in evening dress, and you go up onto that stage and everybody's applauding. And you know, one time I went up and applauded and everybody stood. And they stood for a long time. And I really didn't know what to say. You know, they're all standing and applauding. And you think you can be very gracious and say, thank you, all the little people, you know. But really, in reality, it's just, oh my God, they're doing this for me. You know, I really don't deserve this. I should say, I'm sorry, I'm a complete fraud. Please go home.
No.
It's overwhelming each time. And it's lovely that after, I've been writing mysteries since 1997. So after 25 years, that I can still, you know.
Well, you must be coming up to be on a par with Agatha. Is she?
I can sell as many books as she does. I'll be very happy.
I mean, you've done so many. The diverse range, the things that you have written, the 3 series that you've got about a British aristocrat, Lady Georgiana, the Irish immigrant, Molly Murphy, the Welsh police constable, Evan Evans, the diversity. And then, of course, you've moved to the World War I novel, The Victory Garden, and then you've got 3 for the 2 World War novels. Rhys, where does all this come from?
Well, you know, the thing I like so much is that they're all so different that they keep me fresh. So when I'm writing a Royal Spinist book, I think, oh, what a great idea for Molly Murphy. And then I started writing the standalones when I felt I was advanced enough in my career that I could probably do what I liked. There were ideas I wanted, you know, the In Farleigh Field. I'd been toying with that for ages because I read, maybe around the year 2000, I read this long article about how British aristocrats had helped Hitler in World War II. And I thought, oh, I'd like to write a book about that. So I plotted out a book and I showed it to my agent at that time. And she was scathing. She said, nobody's interested in World War II. And I think it quite insulting that you'd write about people having an easy time in England when so many people were suffering on the continent. So I put it away. And then I got a new agent and I showed it to her many years later and she loved it. So we showed it to both of my publishers. I've got two major publishers, Macmillan and Penguin. Yeah. Yeah. And they both turned it down. One said, this is too far from her brand. We don't want to take a risk with this. And the other one said, this isn't funny. Well, no, it's about a war. So my agent said, I know who'd really like this. And this is Danielle Marshall at Lake Union, which is one of the publishing houses started by Amazon because they realized they were publishing everybody else's books. So why weren't they publishing their own? So Lake Union is their branch that does like the big book, the book club book, you know. So In Farleigh Field came out with that. And of course, has sold probably 700,000 copies. And suddenly both of my publishers were saying, well, if there's anything else Rhys would like to show us.
They're not always right, are they?
No, it's been very satisfying, yeah. So that's nice because I can go anywhere with those. You know, my editor there loves me and I can say, I'd really like to write a book about, you know, an airman who crashes in Tuscany. And they go, oh, wonderful. I'd really like to write a book about a woman who's trapped in Venice. Oh, fantastic. So, you know, anything I come up with, they say, write it. They don't say, probably not. You know, let me see 50 pages. They just say, go ahead. So
but then now you're at the stage of your illustrious career where anything that you wrote would be a bestseller, I guess. Do you think, is that a deliberate attempt to kind of brand it all, do you think, at some point? Or are you still conscious of, no, I'm going to write a story that I have in my mind and I'm writing it because I like the idea of the story?
I think I have a brand to the extent that I am probably in the line of Agatha Christie in that I don't show violence on the page very much. I like clever heroines, and my World War II books, although they're quite harrowing, are not the sort of books that make you go, oh, I don't want to turn the page. You know, they show I think all my books show pretty much the human condition. You know, this is how a person who has to face this will tackle it. The next one that's coming out, for which I'll show you the cover right now.
Yeah, please. Right, yes, Where the Sky Begins.
It's very different because most of my heroines have been sort of fairly middle class, upper class, educated. And she is a Cockney lady with no education who's had a rotten life so far. And the book starts pretty much with her house being bombed and she's buried in the rubble. And when she's pulled out of the rubble, she's not even wearing a stitch of clothing. So the whole thing is a symbol of being reborn. What can I do with a new life when I have no old life to go back to? So this shows you her resilience and how she's evacuated out to Lincolnshire, and she makes the most of everything. And she gets involved with some espionage, and she really makes a difference in a lot of lives. And it just shows you that some people, if you give them the chance, they will grab it. So it's been a really nice book to write because she's a lovely character and everything's been so hard, but she comes through it, you know. And I wanted to show what was it like for the people at home in England, you know, when there was an air raid every night. And you know, and I found when I started writing, I found myself thinking, well, what do you do if your house is bombed and you don't even have a stitch of clothing? Where do you start? You know, they give her at the hospital, they give her some clothes that she knows came from dead people at the hospital. And then they send her out to the countryside and she literally has one outfit and probably a change of underwear.
And that's
and
all. And that's amazing.
She's evacuated to an aristocratic woman who doesn't want her in any way. And the woman's told she has a big house and nobody in it, so she damn well has to have her. But the woman says, when you recover from your injuries, we'll have to discuss what your duties will be. And that's the first time we really see Josie saying, she says, I'm willing to help out, but I ain't no servant. So she's going to stick up for herself. She's a great character. I liked her a lot.
Do the war stories, do they kind of really fascinate you? I mean, you must do so much research.
Yeah. Well, of course, I grew up in those years immediately after the war. So I was conscious of hearing stories about.
Yeah. They were still very much alive, those stories.
Uncle so-and-so and this is what very raw, and in England, I don't know, you're too young for this probably, but I remember London had bomb sites in it well into the 50s. Mm-hmm. You'd go past a ruined church, and there'd be flowers growing on top of where the nave used to be. And it was all very raw for everybody. Lots of people living in temporary housing, and most people had, well, I can tell you, in the 60s, I had a German boyfriend. And oh my God, didn't I catch it from family members? You're going out with one of those who killed our nice boys. And I said, he's 23. He's 23. He was a tiny baby when this happened. But that was still very raw. But I think what's dragged me most to World War II is that we're in this horribly unsettled situation in the world right now. There's so many countries now that have switched to neo-Nazism. I think World War II was the last time we had this clear sense of good versus evil. And we felt that, my father didn't have to join up. He was in he ran a factory. He was in a protected occupation, but he went and joined up and they said, no, you're in a protected occupation. He said, what do you need? They said, we need drivers. And he went back and filled out an application that said driver, because he felt he had to do his share to stop Hitler. And I think lots of people felt that way.
Moving on from that, if we can just talk about the Venice Sketchbook, because that's the one that I've just, and it's behind you. There it is. So do I. I felt it was sad in parts, Rhys.
Yeah, well, I've had so many people written to me and saying, why couldn't Leo have survived? And they had this lovely meeting afterwards.
I know, it's kind of heart-wrenching. And I'm just doing a review now that I'm going to put on my website. There's so much in there. You obviously, because of the timelines, the start of the war, and you get this feeling straight away, don't you, that the year before the war, 1938, there was such a sense of, well, it won't happen. It won't happen.
Yeah.
They were almost in the conversations that go on in the book. They're almost in denial that we're in Venice, we'll be okay. In denial that it won't happen. It won't happen. Of course it does. We know it does.
Yeah. Well, they were quite right in many ways to think it won't happen to us, because both sides agreed at the beginning they wouldn't bomb Venice. It was considered such an iconic place that they were going to leave it alone. So, the Venetians, they've got their sea, they've got fishing boats, and, you go into the Veneto, you've got really good market gardens. So, they probably would have been all right for food. And Mussolini was very lax with, everyone in Italy was told that all the Jews had to wear a yellow star. They didn't in Venice. And I think one of the reasons I started this book, I've been to Venice many times over the years. I don't know if you've read any of my blogs about my childhood. When I was a teenager, my parents used to rent a little villa just outside Venice in Treviso. And we'd drive in and we'd park, and my parents would give me some, my brother was younger, give me some money and say, see you at 5 o'clock. So we'd wander Venice. It was interesting too. My parents would always, first of all, go and have coffee in St. Mark's Square, listen to the little orchestra, you know, today, if my mother was alive, and I'd say you'd be paying $30 a person per.
Easily.
Yeah.
I felt that you knew so much about Venice, and it was only, I think, sort of yesterday, I came across something where it said that how you had gone to Venice as a child with your parents, and because I thought there's no way that you would know that much about Venice.
No,
you know, unless you had first-hand knowledge of it, and you do paint it as a beautiful place.
I love it so much. And you know, when I knew I was going to write this book, I went back and I stayed at the Pensione Accademia, which is where Caroline stays. I had to do that because my aunt was, I'll tell you the origins of this book because they're fascinating, really. My aunt was this incredible Italophile. She studied Italian all her life, and she went to Venice every Easter. And she went to other parts of Italy in the summer. But I found myself as a romantic teenager wondering, why does she go to Venice every Easter? And then I thought, what if she was this consummate English spinster? What if she meets a man there and we don't know about it? So that was in my mind, you know. And then the other thing that sort of was an impetus for this book was I went to last time I was in the time before last I was in Venice, probably 2018 or so. I went to the Biennale, which, you know, for people who don't know,
I want to go. I want to go. I looked it up today. I need to go, Rhys.
It's all held in the Giardini. It's very modern.
I know.
Sculptures with a horse with its head falling off, you know, but they're all among the plants and things. Anyway, the last time I went, I was looking at the program, and they had like the history of the Biennale, and I saw that they'd held it in 1940 and 1942.
Right.
And I thought, who went? You know, the world is at war. How can you have an international art exhibition? And I thought, this is so typically Venice. They say, well, we're not going to let a little thing like a war stop our art exhibition. No. And that, you know, that really summed up the Venetian character to me. So I think that was one of the reasons I wanted to write this book. So when I knew I wanted to write the book, I stayed at the Pensione Accademia, where my aunt always stayed. And this is what she said: there's only one place to stay in Venice, and that's the Pensione Accademia. Because it has a garden, you see. And when one has been walking around the art galleries, it's so nice to sit in the shade, and they bring you a citron pressé. So,
which is exactly what Aunt Hortensia said.
Precisely. I mean, I made her.
How wonderful! I loved Aunt Hortensia.
Yeah, she has
I felt she was a little harsh in some areas, but I loved Aunt Hortensia.
You know, this aunt took me around the whole of Italy when I was about 18. And that was lovely, except because she'd studied Italian all her life, she was afraid to speak it. And so she'd say to me, go and ask what time the next bus goes. So I'd go and I'd come back, and she'd say, you didn't use the subjunctive correctly.
Goodness.
Okay, you know. But no, she definitely became Aunt Hortensia. But so there was a big personal connection to the book. And I think, you know, there was a love story to Venice because I love it. Yes. And all these little festivals, you know, I think
I looked them up.
Yeah.
Because you're never quite sure when you read a book and you think, oh, that sounds a wonderful thing. Is that real? And I looked at all these things up that you had in the book, and I thought, oh my goodness, you know, the one that they have in July with all the barges and the fireworks. And I thought, oh, this is real. This is so
They
cool.
now put up a proper floating bridge, so you can't fall off.
You can't.
But they did have barges in those days. But you know, little things that I'd read or come across in Venice. One of my favorite lines in the book is when he says, you know the name of this street, and she says it's Rio Terra de Assassini.
Yes.
You know what that means? She says, well, Rio Terra is when they filled in the canal. And she says, and assassins? And he says, yeah. And she says, assassins have their own street here. And he says, how else would you find them? And I read that in a book on Venice. And I thought, so typical Venice. Because, you know, another thing I love, even still today, you have all these little shops that make no sense at all in Venice. There's a shop where if I stay in the Pensione Accademia or over on Dossoduro, there's a little shop that sells marbled paper. now whoever looks up one morning and go, oh my God, we're out of marble.
We're out of marble, babe. But it's, I felt sad for Juliet. I felt that, you know, here was this woman that when she was 18 and she first went to Venice, all of life and its magic and its possibilities was within her grasp, but it didn't happen. And I know she met someone, and, you know, she has the encounter with Leo, but she changes from when she's 18 and then she's 28. And you feel that life has not really been that kind to her. She's not, the decks, the cards were stacked against her because of the conformities of that time.
Yeah,
and I felt sorry for her.
You know, her timing was very bad too. I mean, they had the great crash of 29 with her father losing all his money, and he hadn't been from after the war. Or anyway, I mean, I think one of the things I'm very conscious of when I write these first half of the 20th century is the Great War was the thing that hugely changed Britain. You know, there's a whole generation of women who will never marry because 5 million men were lost or something. You know, it was just enormous numbers. And so I think if you were a spinster at the time of the 1914 war, your chances of marrying were 1 in 10. So, you know, and then she's got the bad luck of the Great Depression. You know, she's got a very clingy mother, and she's a dutiful daughter. She does what she's expected of her. She always does what's expected of her. So this going to Venice is her one, you know, in 1939.
Her one chance. Absolutely.
One chance.
Yeah. One chance. Yeah. You have so many references in there that, for example, the art, and when the students get together at the professor's house, and you see an element of Venice, of pre-war almost, luxury, and they meet the Contessa and they talk about art. Do you know much about art? Was that just research?
I mean, I never studied art. I've been to loads of art galleries in my life. You know, I've been educated by being dragged around art galleries all my life, and I've been quite interested in 20th century art. You know, interested. I went to Picasso's home in Malaga and saw his early works and things like that. You know, so I mean, yes, I'm interested in art, and if I'm in a city, I will definitely go to the art gallery. But I'm not an expert, so you know, nobody in here claimed to be an expert. We have Paul Klee coming in, where you know he was a Jew.
I know. Well, first of all, I'm reading about Godalming and Whitley, and I thought, well, that's very strange because I know the air extremely well. And then we talk about Miro and Paul Klee, and I'm thinking, well, that's very bizarre because the two reproductions, not originals, I have in my lounge here in Italy. One is a Miro and one is Paul Klee. And I thought, well, that's just the bizarrest thing ever, you know, really.
Well, I did read about, you know, one of my books I wrote earlier was one of the Molly Murphy books. She's in the early 1900s, and she does meet Picasso and several others. And she learns in those days that their models often got paid by giving them a sketch. And we know this woman was a model for these people. So it's perfectly logical in the book that the sketches are going to come to light.
Absolutely. The professor, I'm just trying to find it because I wrote it down. The professor makes a wonderful, I'll see if I can find it later. The professor says something wonderful, that art is subjective. Art is meant to inspire, maybe annoy you, frighten you, but it's meant to get a reaction. And if it gets a reaction from you, then it's art, because that means you're talking about it. And I thought that was a really beautiful thing to say, because it is so subjective, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it is. It's very subjective. You know, I've been one who's painted all my life, and not incredibly well, but enough to satisfy me. And I've been doing watercolor for the last few years, which I find incredibly hard. the thing that's always interested me is I go to an art class and I'm perfectly aware how well I've done compared with the rest of the class. And other people aren't. I would look and there'd be the most awful daub next to me. And they say, who'd like to show their painting? And she'd say, I will. And you think, has she no idea? How subjective art is to her. That was wonderful. And, it's great that it can be that way, because
Absolutely.
I'm afraid I'm a little too critical of my own. If, sometimes on the internet, I'll find a scene and I think, oh, I'd like to paint that. And then I look at it afterwards and I think, I don't think I can do that well enough. So I don't.
No.
So that's why
it's weird because, well, the professor says not all, going back to your lady that's painted next to you, very apt. The professor says not all art is beautiful. It is meant to evoke an emotional response, maybe to stir anger or sadness even. I think that is so beautiful. As you say, we don't always appreciate the same things. I don't know if my husband quite likes Miro and Paul Klee, but I've had a Paul Klee in my house ever since I was first married. And I just love the colors. I just love the shapes, they're quite amazing, really. The other thing I was going to say is that I detect, and I'm looking at your quotes as well, you have quite a wry sense of humor, don't you? That you put in your books. And there were one or two in the Venice Sketchbook that really made me smile. And I wrote one down because I thought it was absolutely lovely. When they're at the pensione, the landlady, who is Signora Martinelli, she's a very religious lady. She gets up at 6 o'clock to go to mass every morning. But she doesn't go to one particular church because she doesn't like the priest. And she says, I don't like the priest there. He's too liberal. He forgives too easily. 3 Hail Marys? What kind of penance is that? I think that really made me smile, that, religion should really be so inclusive. It shouldn't really be down to how many Hail Marys. And does that say something about how you feel about religion too?
Yeah, well, I'm a Catholic, as you probably guessed from that. But I would be we have the most awful Archbishop, who he's the one who's going to deny Nancy Pelosi communion because she is in favor of choice rather than banning all abortion. And so I'm his worst enemy. But no, I'm a very relaxed. I would happily go into a Baptist church. I'd happily go into a Hindu shrine with a friend. I believe that God just looks down on all of us, and if he knows who I am, then I'm very happy. Right.
And your wry sense of humor, your quotes, you have several pages of quotes, don't you? And I think some of them are absolutely beautiful. What was the other one that I picked up? I'm not quite sure which book this is from because it didn't say, but at least he was useful in some ways. He did make good cheese.
No idea what book that was from. But
I thought, I know, I'll have to find out. I mean, that's such a wonderful sense of humor. That is, where'd you get that sense of humor from, Rhys?
Well, I think it's innately British, don't you? I mean, I think the average person in Britain has this wonderfully
sense of
deadpan humor. They will come out with something that is incredibly funny. So I've never managed yet to write a book that
hasn't got those little comments in there.
The one I've just finished now is a very harrowing book, but there's some people say funny things in it because that's how I think. Why I love the Royal Spinous series, because I can be as funny as I like in that. So, I've created the maid from hell, Queenie, and I've created her sister-in-law, Fig, who I have to tell you, Fig is one of my husband's cousins. I haven't modeled it on her, but I've stolen her name. All his family has these silly nicknames. So it's fun to use them.
And the other thing I wanted to ask you about that I came across in my research, it was an article in The Guardian, and you were talking about the TV show Cheers, which was very popular in the 80s.
Yes.
And I can identify this because we were watching this too. And you said that this particular TV show, where everyone knows your name, which is in the song, where a postman can rub shoulders with a postgraduate, or rub shoulders with a doctor of psychology. And you were quoted as saying that we all long for a place like that in our lives to be ourselves.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that? And just explain how that relates to your life.
Well, I'm lucky. I have a couple of groups of friends. I have a group of friends I've hiked with since 1982. And we used to take lovely trips together. We'd go and hike the Dolomites, or we'd go and hike Cornwall, the Cornish Coastal Trail. And as we've got older and less hikey, we get together for lunch more, or do wimpy walks these days. But the fact is, I know these people. I don't have to pretend in any way with them. You know, I can come in and say, I had the most shitty day. And they all go, oh, I'm sorry, let me make you a cup of coffee. You know, that's what I mean by it. The fact that there should be some place where you don't.
So true. I never thought of it like that before, to be honest. I really didn't.
I mean,
I love the theories, but I kind of, you know, made me think that, you know, to have a place like that where we can just be ourselves and it doesn't really matter who we are with. I thought that's quite profound, actually.
Yeah, I have a deep longing for the traditional English pub, you know, where you walk down in the evening and they'd all go, you know, hello, my love, how are you today?
Not in Godalming, they wouldn't say it like that, Rhys.
No, they'd be frightfully upper class in Godalming, wouldn't they? Yeah.
Can I just finish with, I don't want to keep you, I know you're busy, it's going dark here for me, which is why I've got my aperitivo.
What are you drinking?
It's a rosé.
Yes. Oh.
But what I've done, which I saw in a book somewhere, because all the cherry trees have been out, we're very seasonal here in Italy, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
So you put a cherry in your ice, in your little ice things, and then put water in it and freeze them, so that you end up with a little cherry in it.
Oh, nice! Yeah.
So I thought that was just refreshing.
I asked because from the colour, I'm a huge Aperol spritz person.
Oh, right. Yeah. I like anything wet, Rhys. Anything wet. The sign behind me just says it's all about the wine. That's my mantra. Can I just ask you your favorite childhood book, please?
Well, in later childhood, I mean, if we go into teenage, I'd have to say it was The Lord of the Rings.
All right.
Earlier than that, which was the one I read over and over and over. My early childhood, there were two Enid Blytons that I was always very much into fantasy. I loved Up the Faraway Tree and what was the other called? The Wishing Chip. You know, yes, where they, and then and then of course it was the famous five, of course, because I've always been into mysteries, and the fact that these kids could go to an island by themselves and camp, nobody supervised them, and then I mean, when you look back on it, it was so stupid. They arrested.
I think Enid was of her time, wasn't she?
She was. You know, they trap the smugglers in a cave and they say, you naughty men, we've caught you. And the smugglers say, oh, I'm sorry, we won't do it again. They don't say, we're going to mow you down with our AR-15s, you know.
But I think everybody, I think sometimes, you know, there's always a book that kind of inspires, and I know exactly what you mean by Enid Blyton. I mean, to have a faraway tree with these adventures and Moonface and Silky in the tree, and the slide. You know, the imagination was quite off the scale. Do you base any of your characters on real people that you have met?
Oh, I would say most of them in some way.
Okay.
I mean, I won't say I'm going to base this person on, I mean, Aunt Hortensia is a classic one. You know, the moment I start writing, I hear my aunt's voice. I think it's the voice more than anything. And then, you know, a lot of mine are characters of someone, the annoying person who, you know, who is too intrusive, who has no judgment of personal space. You know, I've known people like that. So my main characters, I don't think ever. I think my main characters always come out of my head. And probably always have a slight element of me in them. People see more element of me than I do, but I think, you know, my main characters always, I have to get to know them. It's interesting. My heroes, since I married a man who is a quarter Irish and had that black curly hair of the black Irish. Is junior branch of the Earl of Dunraven and was very dashing. It's interesting that several of my heroes look remarkably like that.
Like your husband.
I thought, well, that's very interesting, you know, that Darcy, you know, where did he, and Daniel Sullivan, where did they come from? Aha. So perhaps I'm recreating my husband's youth for him, which is very nice.
Lovely. And finally, book reviews. Do you read them?
The real ones I do. I mean, the serious Amazon, you absolutely can't. It was funny.
No.
My you know, Venice Sketchbooks had over 35,000 reviews. So you can't, and anyone can write one. When In Farleigh Field came out, there was a review by a person who said she knows nothing about the British. She knows nothing about aristocrats or how they talk. Well, I'm married to one. I spend my summers at something called Merton Manor. And the older generation used to tell me all these stories like, do you remember that little joke we played on the butler? And anyway, I showed this to John, who was so incensed. He wanted to find this person and hunt her down.
Have them lynched.
I don't read those. I try not to read those. No.
I think you need a bit of a thick skin sometimes, don't you, to be an author? But you know, I'm just looking at your library behind you, Rhys. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing. Do you feel blessed in some way that, you know,
I feel
what would you have done if you hadn't have written? What would you have done, Rhys?
I don't know. I might have taught drama, maybe. I might have taught something. I've done quite a lot of teaching as a writer. You're asked to do workshops and things, and I taught at a university for 10 years. I taught a couple of courses on writing, and I enjoyed that very much. So I might have done that, but I can't imagine not. You know, I started writing when I can't imagine not writing. So it's
true that you do how many books a day? No, you do two titles a year, and then you write every single day. Is that true?
Pretty much, yeah. I normally, between books, I take about two to 3 weeks just to clear my brain. But at the moment, this is getting more than I actually anticipated. I'm doing 2.5 books a year because I was doing a Royal Spiness and I was doing one of the big standalones, which they're big, they're 400 pages. And then my daughter came to me and said, I think I'd like to write the Molly Murphy series with you, because I hadn't done them for a few years. And we kept getting all these emails. When's the next Molly book coming out? When, you know, so I was a little bit ambivalent. And I thought, well, you know, she's my daughter. I love her. What if we start this and it's just not going well? So I said, okay, we'll give it a try. And of course, the publisher was thrilled because they've been bugging me all this time. So we came up with an idea and we wrote the first book, and it was such a joy because she loves doing the research. So, you know, she's coming up with all these fun little things. You know, today I found that there was a train that did so-and-so. And she just literally took off running. She just got Molly's voice and she sort of said, well, I can envisage the party scene, so I'll do that. And there she was. So we're now planning. She was supposed to be here this week, only her husband went to El Salvador with a group of students and they all got COVID down there. And so they were all marooned down there until they tested negative. So he came home having tested negative, and 2 days later she got it. So she's now got COVID. So I'm waiting. She has tested negative, but she's going to wait a few more days before she comes to us. Then we really sit there and thrash out the next book, so we can just say, well, I'll take this part and you take that part. And
when we've done it, in your DNA, then it's in the family DNA.
Well, people say to me, are you retired too?
Actually, never.
No, it's kind of fun, really, because people, when you get to a certain age, they look at you and call you dear. And and I'm on a plane in first class, and someone says, "Are you flying to see your grandchildren?" And I say, "No, actually, I'm flying to New York to be presented with an award." And they go, "Oh, what sort of award?" And I go, "The Edgar for the best mystery novel in America." And they go, "Oh." So I enjoy it.
Well, that's just wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. May there be many, many more books to come. And again, I want to thank you for your time. It's been absolutely wonderful to talk to you. If you come to Italy, grazie mille. I tell you, if you come to Italy, please, call in.
No, I've had fun. Lovely. And enjoy Italy for me, since I can't be there this year.
But thank you so much. And I just love the Venice Sketchbook. And I'm glad it had, I know it didn't really have so much of a happy ending for Juliet, but it does in a way, doesn't it, really?
Yeah,
there is a kind of a happy ending.
That's why she sends Caroline there to put everything right.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there is a message. There is always hope. There is always love and positivity in everything. So thank you so much, Rhys. I've had a blast. I really have. And yes, next time you're in England, a fish and chip supper in Godalming, I think.
Fish and chips sounds good. I've been craving British food, I have to tell you that.
I can imagine. Anyway, have a lovely day. It's just going dark for me, so I'll sign off. And thank you so much, Rhys.
You're very welcome, Wendy. Okay.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.